This video might be a little bit preachy, a little bit more boring than usual because it's not a funny video. It's just a video where I try to recap what's going on in American culture and the culture in English-speaking countries in general. And I think it's also coming towards Eastern Europe. But if you read the American press, you're going to notice that you don't see words like liberty, freedom, tolerance. These words aren't mentioned at all. They're non-existent. I dare you to try to find an article from a mainstream media outlet that explains why liberty is important. Instead, you're going to find new values, new words that are being preached. These words are diversity, inclusion, equity, and accountability. And all of these words mean something else. They're perversions of what the definition of these words should mean. People who speak in liberalism, like people who speak in freedom, if you will understand something when they hear these words, which is exactly what the people using these words want to expect. They want you to misinterpret them so that you believe one thing while they're doing another. For example, diversity. What does diversity mean? Well, it's the idea that if you have people with different experiences, like someone who grew up on a farm and someone who grew up in the city, and you put them together, they might come up with different ways to tackle a problem, so you have more solutions. So therefore, diversity is good. But that's not what they mean. What they mean is diversity based on arbitrary characteristics, such as skin color, sexual orientation, or gender. In other words, have more people of color be represented in positions of power at the boards of companies or in leadership positions. But that's not really what they mean either, because we noticed the same people that were saying more women need to be placed in positions of power freaked out when Amy Coney Barrett was nominated for the Supreme Court. The same people that advocate for more visibility for trans people are freaking out when Caitlyn Jenner wants to run in California. It doesn't really mean what you think it means. Diversity means only one thing. Put people that like to point out sexism, racism, homophobia in society, put them in positions of power. It doesn't matter if they're people of color, it doesn't matter if they're transgender or anything like that, all right? Just put the people that criticize the most in positions of power in the hopes that they shut up. Then you look at inclusivity. Like, what does inclusivity mean? Well, it means that everything should be for everyone. It means that every single job, every single hobby, every single sport should be open for every single person. No place should feel unwelcoming for any person. And you think maybe that's a good thing, although I disagree. Like, I think certain hobbies should cater to the people that like the hobby. Like, for example, maybe a person is squeamish and doesn't like violence, therefore they wouldn't like boxing. So I don't think we should make boxing less of a contact sport, like less violent, just because, some squeamish person might be offended. But okay, even if you were to think that, yes, everything should cater to everyone, so video games should be for everyone, comic books should be for everyone, movies should be for everyone, and that's what inclusivity means. When you look at what inclusivity is in practice, it's actually exclusivity. Because the logic goes, it's like more people would like comic books if you wouldn't have people that are far right enjoying comic books. So if we kick off the people that are far right, if we exclude them from the hobby, if we ban these people from the hobby, then you're going to have the more cultured, more refined people that are more vast in numbers and they're more decent going into the hobby. The only problem is, like, what is far right? So then you end up ostracizing very talented people from the industry. You end up kicking off a lot of people that are very talented and very good because apparently they scare off people. And we see this happening in science as well. The first indication was the guy which managed to land a shuttle on a comet. His achievement was nullified in his day of glory because the reporters looked at him and it's like, oh, you got an ostracizing shirt on you. You have a shirt that has very suggestive depictions of cartoon women, and because of that, we the journalists, we the experts know that you keep women out of STEM because of that shirt, right? So that is inclusivity. By banning this person's freedom of expression, by banning this person's ability to wear whatever he wants, we create a more inclusive space. So inclusivity means speech codes. It means kicking people away from certain positions. It doesn't mean what you think it means. And then we move on to equity. What is equity, right? So equity is the idea that because of past historical adjustments, we now need to redistribute power and redistribute wealth based on arbitrary characteristics. In other words, it's racism. I mean, it's flat out racism. You get to see the mayor of Chicago just flat out saying that she's not going to talk to white reporters anymore because that's what equity is like. And if taken to its extreme logical conclusion, you even have various papers in academia suggesting that in a hospital, patients are being treated, like should be treated based on their racial background. So because, like, for example, people of color haven't been prioritized for healthcare in the past, we should prioritize them now at the detriment of other people. Eh? That's what equity means. Like, all these words, you think you know what they mean, but you really don't. Right? Like, you assume what they mean. But when you actually look at what they do in practice, when you actually look how the activists use these concepts, which you might agree with in the beginning, you might not agree with how they're being used. In other words, it's like buying a product because you believe in the advertisement, you believe on what's on the box, but when you use the product, you end up getting cancer. So that's the problem, right? Like with the three things. Now, the fourth one is accountability. Accountability means punishing people outside the legal system for perceived crimes that they may have or may have not committed. It doesn't really matter. Like, people who are problematic, they need to have their past looked into. We will find things that they have done years ago which are problematic, and they're going to be used today in order to cancel them, to deplatform them, to unperson them, to persecute them. That's what accountability means. Persecuting people based on things they have done in the past. But you would think that the same standard would apply for everyone, right? You would think that, sure, maybe we should live in a society where people are being persecuted if they have done something wrong 9 years ago or 10 years ago, because there's no statute of limitation for this. And you have reporters from CNN, like Cuomo, who constantly talks about how you should believe all women. He talks about how the accusation of a woman, like if she accuses someone of sexual misconduct, we should believe her. We should immediately believe, because why would the victim lie? What would the victim have to gain from lying, right? Like, he sets the rules for people like you and me. He sets the rules for society. Like, if you listen to CNN, this is how a decent person behaves. When an accusation of sexual violence happens, you automatically believe the person making the accusation without fact-checking, without anything. Like, this automatically 100% you believe, right? And there have been people fired for it. You know, famous people like Johnny Depp, for example, they lost their job because of accusations. There's another guy in the video gaming community who was doing a voiceover for the Call of Duty game. He got fired based on accusations alone. Like, no evidence was being shown, just like lost his job because of accusations. There's plenty of examples that I can give. In the past, certain accusations have even proven to be false. The Rolling Stone incident, when the press accused a fraternity of harboring rapists and criminals, right? Ends up the fraternity got vandalized, it was shut down, the people there got spat on the street, their reputation foreverly tarnished, and then it was found out it was a lie. The journalist making the story apologized. And I suppose that's accountability, right? It creates a more fair and just society, because the laws we have aren't enough. When you go to a courtroom and you have a judge and a lawyer and you get a jury of your own peers and there's evidence, that's not a good system. What we need is accountability. We need the mob to hold people accountable. Perfect. The only problem is that it doesn't seem to be applied equally. Certain people have a status of nobility. Certain people are better than others. In other words, remember when I said about CNN, Chris Cuomo talking about how you should believe all women? Well, turns out that his brother is in a little bit of a pickle. Based on his morality, not mine, not ours. No, like, based on his morality, he has been accused by women. So we should believe the women, right? I mean, certainly Chris Cuomo must believe the women. He is the one that set that morality forward. But instead of believing the women, he lectures his brother on how to react to the media shitstorm. He teaches him, he explains to him, like, look, this is how the press is going to tackle this. This is how you need to react. He coaches him. You know, maybe he does believe the women, but he is willing to help a person accused, a guilty person, I suppose, right? According to his ideology. So, how does that work? Right? Like, why do people like us need to live by one set of rules that is set by people we don't elect, by people we don't put into positions of power, by self-anointed people in positions of power, who tell us how to live, but they don't live by the way they say we should live? Isn't that a little bit infuriating? Well, are we back to medieval time where we have the nobility and the peasantry? Is this it? I'll tell you what's happening, all right? You have a group of people that have realized that the strongest power in human existence is the power of creating a clique. So if you know the correct people, then you can promote people into positions of power. Like if you happen to know the lady who's the HR lady at a company and she does the hiring and the firing, knowing that clique is a power you have. Now you're an important person. So if you know more HR ladies, if you happen to have like a whole harem of HR ladies at your phone call, all of a sudden people seek you out. All of a sudden you're an important person. All of a sudden you have power, even though no one elected you in a position of power. So to recap, you have a group of people that like to criticize constantly. They criticize everything they see. They criticize things for being sexist, for being racist, for being homophobic. It doesn't really matter. They criticize and criticize and criticize and criticize. And companies don't want to be criticized. They want these people to shut up. So instead of the company changing, they put these people in positions of power hoping they shut up. But when these people are in positions of power, they promote other critics, other like-minded individuals in other positions of power, and all of a sudden they take over entire companies. And now you don't even have the news anymore. Now you have left-leaning news, right-leaning news, because everything is political according to these people. If you're not on board with their criticism, you're against them. Let's call these people critical theorists, because that's really what they are. They use critical theory. They criticize and criticize and criticize in the hopes that someone is going to give them a position of power to shut the fuck up. And then they take over that institution and they implement their values, which is diversity, equity, accountability, and inclusion, which is what I told you it means, not what you think it means. And that's how it works, right? So when you look at accountability, if this would have happened on the right, if let's say a right-wing person, I don't know, Ben Shapiro or Jordan Peterson or anyone like this would have been accused of sexual misconduct, and you'd have had Tucker Carlson from CNN lecturing them about how to behave with the press, it would be the worst scandal of the century. And this is something that you need to understand is deliberate. Because when a critical theorist does something wrong, it's usually met with a meh. Maybe some mild criticism, a couple of articles in the paper, but it's like a meh. But when anyone else does it that's not a critical theorist, then it's major coverage. It's like 24/7. So in other words, Chris Cuomo, who works for CNN, and helped his brother bury a sexual harassment story, that is more of a meh. And it's an asymmetry, right? Because if Fox News would softball a conservative, then there would be endless coverage and countless retweets and from the blue checky marks on the Twitter. And they will act like a virgin mademoiselle. Like literally, this ruins the integrity of journalism. They're going to act as if they're about to faint. Like they can't believe what just happened. They don't believe what transpired. Like their heart is going to jump out of their chest. They're about to faint. But when it happens with a progressive, all of a sudden no more demands of accountability. A little bit of a like a bad child misbehaving. It's very similar to that quote from the Gulag Archipelago, which said, your punishment for having a knife, when they searched, you would be very different from the thieves. For him to have a knife were mere misbehavior, tradition, he didn't know any better. But for you to have a knife, it would be terrorism. And it's the same. I mean, you know, the progressive establishment press doing things like this, breaking their own rules, well, it's tradition. It's expected. I mean, it's normal for them. They can do it. They're at the CNN. But if you do it, oh my God. You know, perfect example. Look at YouTube's terms of service. What do you think would happen, hypothetically speaking, if I were to walk on the street and I would see a car crash? And even if there would be no fatalities whatsoever, but let's say, you know, the person might injure themselves, there's a lot of blood and stuff, and I would start reporting on it, and I would, you know, like, treat it very seriously. I wouldn't make fun of it or anything. I would be very decent about my reporting, because, hey, you know, I just happened to see it. And I'm showing how the ambulance people are coming up, and they're opening the car, and they're taking the guy, right? What do you think would happen if I upload that on YouTube? At best, I would be demonetized, probably my entire channel. At worst, I would just be kicked off the platform, right? But then when you go at CNN, and they're showing dying kids in Syria from gas attacks, and they're gasping for air, and like they're surrounded by dead children in there, oh, that's fine. You know, that I wonder if that video even gets monetized, because different rules, right? It's the power of the human clique. These people that are the critical theorists share common values. And just like you have people that have common values band with each other and protect each other, you know, like you used to have like that organization, the Masons, right? Like, what were the Masons? It was a secret brotherhood where people knew each other and clicked with each other. It wasn't necessarily a conspiracy theory, but it was expected from a Mason in a position of power to promote other Masons, right? And all of this went on until people got fed up with it, and then they started demasoning institutions. It's very similar to this. It doesn't have to be a conspiracy theory. In fact, it would have been great if it was a conspiracy theory. Because a conspiracy theory means that there are a couple of people at a table in a dark room conspiring, right? Like they're talking with each other. This isn't a conspiracy theory. It's far worse. Because it's ingrained in the ideology of the critical theorist that being a critical theorist means you're a great person, regardless of what you do. Like, as long as you speak the speech and you say the correct things and you champion the correct causes, you're a great human being. You can be, apparently, even a person accused of sexual assault. Well, they're saying the correct thing, so we're just going to look the other way. You notice this happening in the Catholic Church as well, by the way. Like, when a couple of priests start bookering little boys and the other priests just turn their head around and saying, oh, well, I didn't see anything. Why? Because they view them as being good people. Why? Because they're men of God. That's why. It's very similar to this. There's no conspiracy. It's like a Catholic meeting another Catholic. You know, already they have a connection because they have the correct set of values. So that is the main issue. And when you look at accountability, you'll notice a very interesting pattern. When a centrist or a right-winger does something bad, immediately accountability is demanded. When a progressive does something bad, more often than not, we need to get a second chance. You know, like, remember that guy who masturbated on a Zoom call? Oh, well, how many of us don't masturbate? All of a sudden, like, a lot of articles defending that guy. Do you think they would have defended the guy if he was Tucker Carlson? Let's be honest. If James Gunn manages to get fired, oh, we need second chances for the man. We need another chance. When Cenk Uygur from the Young Turks gets caught up doing something bad, oh, well, you know, made a mistake. He was young and innocent. He apologized. We need to give a second chance. All of a sudden, redemption is on the table. But there is no redemption when a right-winger does it, right? Like, and there is also the framing, which is very interesting. When a right-wing person does something bad, oh, we need accountability. Immediately, demand accountability. When a left-leaning person does something bad, oh, look at all these right-wingers harassing this poor left-wing person who did just a tiny mistake. These people wouldn't be able to live in a vacuum. They need the right-wingers in order to justify an enemy. Like, the only way you can justify for behaving like a total asshole and a hypocrite is if you have, like, someone else and you say, well, yeah, but my behavior is justified because I'm fighting against this evil person, which is a lot more evil than me. And that's the only way they can justify their behavior. So yeah, accountability is just something that is being used to hurt centrists and right-wingers. It's not something that you're going to see often being used against the left. The critical theorists, I mean. Because, by the way, when I say the critical theorists, there's a lot of left-wing people that aren't critical theorists. And that's important to mention every now and then. You know, like, I don't want to be a radical, like, either you're with me or you're against me. No, there's a lot of left-leaning people that aren't critical theorists. This is absolutely true. Like, critical theorists are people that are on the extreme end of the spectrum. They're either useful idiots, but more often than not, they're very savvy people, which realize that if they say the correct words and they do the correct things, they end up getting power. Whether that is financial, whether it is access to cliques, whether it is access to, like not being put on a blacklist. Because there's a lot of blacklists in industries nowadays. Especially in the comic book industry, video game industry, entertainment industry. Yeah, you say something wrong, you do something bad, it's like a blacklist. I wouldn't be surprised if like you'd have two centrist movie actors talking about their political ideology about freedom and liberty behind a trailer. Like they're doing a drug deal or something because they don't want the other people to hear it. Absolutely ridiculous. But, you know, like hopefully this video helped you understand a little bit more about the terms that they're being used. And I do think it's important to call out hypocrisy when you see it. Because I see a lot of people, oh yes, I know, like they're hypocrites. Okay, maybe you know. But there's a lot of other people that don't know. And I'm telling you, most people are not going to listen to a drunk preacher about abstinence. And not touching alcohol, okay? Like if the village priest is a complete drunk and he can't even utter two words together, most people are going to listen to his sermons. And this is literally what some of these journalists are trying to be. Modern preachers that preach to the public on how to behave. And maybe the public are going to be less likely to listen to them if they knew that they don't even follow what they're preaching. Because I guarantee to you, a lot of people have no clue that this is happening. Let me know what you guys think, though, and I'll see you in the comment section.